I invite you to notice as you sit that you are anchored to the earth. As I say that, part of what I want to name is that this is a permanent relationship of your status as an earthling. As long as you're here embodied and on this planet, you are anchored to this earth. We call that force gravity. And it sounds very scientific when we give it that name. But it is never a separate thing. It is never you, earth, gravity, three separate things. Always one thing. As you come into this relationship, I invite you to bring some attention to your back body and what's behind you. You can use your imagination, or you can use your inner subtle senses. And just feel what's behind you. While breathing and feeling your connection. Always connection to the earth, always connection to what's behind you. I invite you to feel into your left side. I'm just using your imagination or your sensing, noticing how it feels, noticing what's there. Noticing that even if you don't know with your mind, there's a realm of connection, always connected. And breathing that connection. I invite you to attend to your right side, reaching out with your sensing, noticing what's connected there. Maybe it's familiar. Maybe it's brand new. Always connected. I invite you to bring attention to your front body. Noticing what's there. Noticing those connections. Always connected. I invite you to connect above and around. Sensing again with your imagination or with your inner sensing. You can even take a little journey into the cosmos and fly around a bit. I'm going to invite you to breathe here. Come back into your center while feeling all of these connections, these always connections. And you can drop in and feel us, feel each of us on this call, each of us who will be on this call in the future, each one connected, each one having a distinct experience that's still connected. In this space, I'm going to invite you to come really close now into your own heart. Always connected and distinct. Your own heart. Maybe not distinct. It's the paradox in there. Interesting to feel. Coming into your own heart. However that shows up. I'm going to invite you to sense or imagine really beautiful container that supports the thriving and highest expression of your heart in this body, in these connections on this planet at this time. With each other, with all the beings and all the non-human beings, the multidimensional beings. Creating a sphere of loving, high vibration energy, a boundary. A semi-permeable boundary, perhaps, but the boundary that nourishes and supports the thriving and highest expression of you. I'm going to invite you to take a few breaths and then start to come into this shared virtual space and to open your eyes as you are ready. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see you here. So my name is Alison Fornés, and I am not an economist or a historian or but I am a systems thinker, and I am a systems sensor, and I have I found myself, I encountered a situation, probably not unlike a situation you might encounter and maybe have encountered or are inside of right now. And in my particular version of this story, I went from being, from growing up in poverty with a single mom to getting a good education and taking a track that a lot of people take. In my position, you know, it's a good track for poor people to move into the middle class, which is I became a teacher, and I loved it. I love teaching. Taught high school in New York City for 12 years, and then and I was really good at it. I had succeeded. I achieved middle class status, and I thought I was done. Like I thought, good, I'm going to stay here. And instead, my life decided I wasn't going to do that. And so I just encountered all these new barriers until it became impossible for me to continue my teaching. And in that time, I actually felt I created this opportunity, opening the space about what's next, and the what's next became constellation work, and that's what I've been doing. I discovered constellation work in 2011, and I really have dedicated the past, you know, many years to that path, because it was so powerful and meaningful to me at that time, and I knew it was what I wanted to do. And it really was feeding, it really wove together some things that were already a part of who I am and was. I used to teach systems thinking in high school, so I had that part of me. I have a very active mindfulness practice, and I would play with mindfulness in these sort of dynamic ways of how to be present in a classroom context. So for me, when I discovered constellation work, I thought, oh, this is kind of like bringing together these two parts of my life that I'm already interested in. Okay. Some of you are constellations facilitators. You understand, you've had your own reason why you're doing this work now. But what happened was, once I decided that I'm going to do this work, I had to then figure out how to make a living. And I was a wreck at it, like really bad, because I couldn't figure out, I did these things. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I don't want to go down that path too much. I just wasn't very good. But part of the reason I wasn't very good is because there seemed to be this gap where when you're sort of now taking a path that is not already structured, for me, that structure was we used to call it the rat race. I don't know if people still call it that way, but you get that job, you work that job till you die, you get there, or till you retire, you get the retirement, etc. And so I struggled to figure out how to actually make a good living. And what I discovered in this journey was that a lot of people don't know, but not just poor people like me, not just people who didn't come up with a good like financial education, because it really has nothing to do with that, right? Even people who had money, even people who had a good job, like very few people could make this turn out of the sort of system that we are all conditioned into, and into a new space. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a pause, but I am kind of curious if this, I don't know if I want to, I don't know how to ask a good question for the chat box, but I guess I'm curious to know, not just if this resonates. I know that it resonates for a lot of people. I already kind of know that, because that's such a familiar journey. We're all on this similar journey. But I think maybe I want to know. Well, I'll tell you the secret, or the secret meaning the secret thing that I didn't want to talk about as I was trying to make sense of this, which is I found that there was a space that was terrifying, and in fact still is terrifying. And that to me has been the most mysterious piece, that leaving behind that system and then entering in a kind of unknown space, and that unknown space is terrifying. And so maybe that's part of what I want to know. I don't know if you want to out yourself, but I'm kind of curious if you've had that experience of entering the terrifying space. Yes, I see some people nodding. Yes. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the terrifying space. I'm going to share a little, bit about see if I can get this share screen thing to work. I do have a little bit of a, here we go. All right. So as I was sitting with this conversation, lots of things have been coming. And one of the things that came is I was really able to refine the question that I think we all share, which is, how do I receive from life, and what do I need to give in exchange? How do I receive from life, and what do I need to give in exchange? And each and every one of us have to, especially in our society, and by I'm an American, and I'm going to generalize into Western society and Western economies. Obviously, there are some variations between our American economy and, but there is a very similar pattern, and I'll talk more about why there are so many similarities. And in fact, I used the term capitalism when I started talking about this and promoting this, but I'm really referring to there's a basic structure. It almost doesn't matter if it's called capitalism or called even something else. If there's a kind of basic worldview underlying the economic structure, to me that's the same thing. So the basic, I'm going to share with you what that basic piece is in a minute. What's the underlying? All right, here we go. Now, as I said at the opening, I'm not an economist or I'm a thoughtful person, but I have been learning from the field. So as a Constellations facilitator, the information that I receive from the field, and I think many of you know this, is so valuable and so like embodied. Now I know that I've merged with this information, and over a few years now, there are a few pieces that really stand out for me. One of them was the constellation I facilitated that I now refer to as the clever idea of money. A couple of people, at least one person was on that call, who's here now. Another one was if corporate capitalism, this is Marianne's on this call, but corporate capitalism were a bloated caterpillar. If corporate capital is a bloated caterpillar, will it ever become a butterfly? So that was another constellation we did. And then very recently, I did some ancestral reconnection work through Constellation. I called that piece Remembering Taino. And that opened up, in addition to this information that I'd been getting more generally about these dominant economic systems, there are some very specific things that opened up for me when I did that Remembering Taino piece. So I have a couple more word terms. Bartolomé de las Casas, I'm reading, he was a Spanish colonist who recorded the atrocities against the Taino and the indigenous people. He was an advocate for the human rights of the native people at the time of Columbus and during the early Spanish colonial rule. And then Sharon Blackie, Marianne, I just want to shout out to you because Marianne actually is in a lot of these things. My friend Marianne recently shared with me a story from Sharon Blackie that came exactly at the right time for this program. And so what I want to, so this is, I want to take you to a particular moment. So we're going to start with a story, and this story is a symbol for me of much of what I've been making sense of as I figure out how to make this transition out of the structures of capitalism. And so you can close your eyes if you like, but I want you to imagine some islands here in the Americas. My own ancestry is connected to Boriken, which is known today as Puerto Rico. So I want you to imagine these islands. You could imagine them right around 1492 if you like. But these are verdant places with a vibrant people and thriving people, really, really vibrant society. They are maritime people, so they live on both the oceans are part of their relationship, their earth relationship, as are the fresh water and the land itself. They know agriculture, they know pottery, they know all the things, really. They also have an incredibly deep relationship with the spiritual dimension, in constant communication, both with the dimensions of life on Earth and life beyond Earth. And when the Spanish came to this beautiful, verdant place, they were really interested in one thing, and that thing was gold, as you know, as you may know. And so the story I want to tell is one where now, after there has been just terrible destruction of people and place by the Spanish, looking and get it for this gold and enslaving the local people, a chief, a local cacique, he says to his people, he points to a basket of gold that he's gathered, and he says to his people, this is the God of the Spanish. I don't know what word he used for them, but this is the God of these invaders. Let's dance. Let's perform a ceremony to honor their God, because maybe they won't brutalize us if we honor their God. And so they performed a ceremony to honor their God. And then at the end, because they didn't want to be, hoarding, they wanted to further honor the God and not hoard him in the village or the gold in the village, they tossed the basket of gold in the river. So if you have been imagining that moment, because what happens next is that the Spanish come and they Of course, that had actually no impact on them. They continued to destroy the people and ravage the land. And we all know what happened next. But that moment to me stands, I'm going to pause the share for a second. That moment stands out for me because I think about that moment right now. Because I feel that space when the God that's represented in all the things of that land, it's everywhere, encounters a God that's called gold. And it was a turning point, certainly here in the Americas. And I know that you have a story like this too in your ancestry, wherever your people come from. That moment when there are these two meetings between one way of being in relationship with creation and another way. But what happened very recently when I was standing, because I am a descendant of those Taino people, but I'm also a descendant of those settlers. Those are both here behind me. And I'm looking at those two gods and I'm asking this question with those ancestors behind me, can we make the turn? Can we shift back to the God of all these relationships, the God of this divine earth place, the God of the divine in each of us? And can we put the gold back in the river where it belongs? Where we can still, the Taino people, they loved gold. They had beautiful jewelry. They made beautiful things out of the gold. It was a treasure. They loved to play ball in the fields. They had rubber, which was the Europeans had never seen rubber before, and they had this game. They had music and dancing. They had sacred places and rituals that they had been cultivating over thousands of years. There are other pieces of information that I've been receiving about how about their connections with the dimensions beyond Earth. So they're just a beautiful, incredibly rich culture. There's an anthropologist who talks about the Taino people and wonders, did they represent the flourishing of humanity? So it's a great moment to think, to reflect on, as we here are the grandchildren of that moment. And you and your ancestry, your own version of that moment, here you are. And here we look around and we can see, oh, the God of gold has actually destroyed our planet. And it continues. And so how do we make a turn away from that? When I stood with these two ancestors in preparation for this call, I was very surprised by one thing. I was expecting to stand and see my Taino ancestors and feel their suffering, and looking down the way and be in this grief and distress. That's not what I saw. My ancestors are not harmed. But do you know who was harmed? The settler was harmed. The harm had already happened and it was being projected out over and over and over again. And so when I stood with my settler ancestor, I actually felt his fear. And it was fear that he had at first when he looked at my Taino ancestor. wondering if something could be reestablished. Is there even a desire? And of course, the answer is, it's really, the answer is in you. Is there a desire to reestablish that connection? Okay, I'm going to go back to the share screen here and show you an image that came. So as I was preparing for this talk, you know, there's the body of information, the field of this conversation, the field of its creation. And I started to make a drawing that represented its, the image. So the drawing isn't great, but maybe I'll describe it first. Actually, this could help. If you, again, if you're open, you can close your, open. If you're open to it, you can close your eyes, but you can certainly just imagine. But the image I received is this sphere. This glowing, sparkling, multicolored sphere. It could be a torus, actually a T-O-R-U-S, torus. It probably is, but we can call it a sphere for now. And I could feel that as the sphere of creation, of possibility. And in that was this flat, black shape. It wasn't multidimensional, it was a kind of two-dimensional, dense shape. And I imagined that as this system that we've been living under. I'm going to show you the picture I have here. Yeah, here you go. So something like this. And when I zoom in on that black image, I receive this. Which feels a lot like, I mean, I recognize, I drew that image and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that's my experience. You know, I'm in this, how do I make money question. And then I sort of find myself caught in this maze. And then I actually figure out my way to make money. And then when I get back into the money making of this particular system, it actually is imprisons. Even when you're rich. Even if you win the game. As my ancestor shows me, it's not that there's something called the victim who loses and the winner wins. We are all harmed. I wonder what the next, okay, here we go. Oh, okay. Yeah. And so we're going to go back to this image because for me, what this question is about, how do I receive from life and what do I give in exchange? Oops, we'll go back here, sorry, is defined right now by this little black box, this system here. And what's happened is that when we think about our well ancestors, ones like my Taino ancestors or your ancestors, which you have well ancestors who lived in, we'll go back here, who lived in this sort of, you can see that sphere, the flow of giving. There wasn't even, they were not asking the question, how do I receive from life? They were receiving from life and they were giving to life. It was very natural. So for you, bring yourself to those well ancestors. And you can see that their needs, here we go here, we recognize this triangle. These needs, there was no separation. There was no, we could meet these needs by living life in our communities. Nothing in between. These things were not separate from life itself. But then this clever idea. So the clever idea of money, I'll talk about that constellation. So I did a constellation called the clever idea of money. And one of the things that showed up when we first, it was a time travel constellation, which means we moved, we created a structure, we represented different elements in the structure, and then we moved through different periods of time to feel how those elements evolved. And so when we were at the place where the clever idea of money arises in the field, life recognizes that the clever idea serves life. The clever idea of money serves life. And at the time, the things that we call, which you can trace, historians sort of trace money, the development of money, with things that started off like shells or other kinds of objects. But money in that time represented relationship. It was a way of saying, we are in a relationship together. I will help you, harvest, and we'll have this exchange. It also was a way to distribute. You can imagine, we can all imagine, how could money benefit life? Sometimes it's a surprise to think of that when we're living in this dominant system, but you can imagine right now, how could money benefit life? It can help distribute goods that are localized here and maybe get them over there. By setting up different kinds of exchanges. So there's a way in which when we experience the early appearance of the clever idea, it benefited life. But eventually what happens is life, that where all of these needs here and wants and desires, suddenly they become decoupled from life itself. And something comes in the middle, and that thing in the middle becomes what we're experiencing now, which is money. So we have decoupled the natural arising of these things, put money in between, and that's why we have this system here. It's an illusion, but it's convincing. Because this sphere of life and of creation is the backdrop. It's the truth upon which we can create anything we want. And right now we've created this thing. And for those of us who have decided, oh, I don't like this thing anymore. In fact, even in honor of the people who seem to be the perpetrators, who are actually now come to us and say, I'm being harmed. We can have our well ancestors on the other side support us in making a transition out of that system and back into life. So there's a kind of leaping. I don't know, can I show that? Anyways, you can imagine, what is it like to leap from that black square into life? What is that like? Okay, I feel like I should take a moment. So I want to take a moment. If you have comments or questions or anything that's come up, I invite you, you can drop something in the chat if you like. You can unmute yourself and make a comment or question. I'll drink some water. That's right, we have to take money and relevant structures from 2D, 3D to 5D. That's what I see from my own journey in that image. Leap and then will appear. Yes. Yes. Charity water. Yeah. Yeah. So what about that? What about money? What about money? So it says Charity Water is an organization seeking to give access to clean drinking water to every human on earth. That requires money. So I'm going to pick up on with that question and comment, and we'll go back here again. Let's see. So here, we'll go with this, now this statement here. Capitalism is an abusive relationship. So we spoke about how this system decoupled life and the things that life gives to us because it's life, because it's creation, and put money in between. So we'll sort of put that image aside, and we'll talk more specifically about this part. Capitalism is an abusive relationship. Because the thing about abusive relationships is that, and especially if you think about in the context of capitalism, we are talking about a very long line of ancestors who have lived in this system. And so again, when I say capitalism, what I really mean is any system, any economic structure that has separated life, what life will give to you, and put something in between. And that thing in this case is called money. So we've got generations of people who've grown up. Those people our ancestors are all here. They're all present with us. We feel their patterns. And the structures of abusive relationships are such that when you're in them, and especially if you've been in them for generations, there's that you don't actually know that it's a surprise that there's another kind of relationship. In fact, in some ways, you're pretty sure that this is every relationship. And when you have those patterns in your body, it often becomes every relationship. Because until you clear those patterns, they attract, right? You're working from those patterns. And when I talk about attraction and manifestation, I offer those things very sort of just place them out there, because there are ways in which those terms are used right now, and I can feel the part of me that cringes, and so I want to. We're going to get more to this, but for me, when I use those words, what I'm really talking about is exiting an abusive relationship, healing and clearing the patterns, giving ourselves the time and the space. That's our journey. That's our journey. And then entering a new relationship with the beloved. And that relationship can include money, because money is a creation. Money is something we have already put in our world right now. It's out there. Just like, the other day I wanted a new table for my studio, and manifestation, synchronicity, but I got exactly the table I had imagined is now sitting in my studio, and I got it for free. Money, the dining room table, and in fact, money in some ways is even more ephemeral than the dining room table. But the part of us the pattern in us that is convinced that it cannot receive money, that's the part that we have to spend some time with. And so we're in a relationship now. We're transitioning out of a relationship. I kind of want to take this one off because I don't like here. I'll go back to this image. What we're doing is we leave this square, as we leap into the void. we're actually taking a very personal journey. The thing about this, what I'm sharing and what I'm learning is that this is not a get rich quick. I'm not I'm not going to tell you how to beat the financial system, although that might happen. Like I actually, if that's what you want, great. But I want to name that what I'm in, this is a different way of thinking about this movement. What I'm inviting you to think about is that you are leaving an abusive relationship. You are healing the patterns, and now you are moving forward in whatever way the body that you're in, the being that you are, wants to begin to experience and start to trust again that life, that the beloved is giving to you and wants to give to you. And that is a very different relationship, to feel yourself not trusting. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And then to allow yourself to extend your awareness to the beloved, who is just loving and patient. And really, I want to say it wants to prove to you, but it's not even pushy like that. It's just inviting you to open a relationship with what is. I'm afraid. And then extend your awareness out to the beloved. And and there'll be work. We all have the different ways in which we work through the patterns that are in us, in our bodies. But that's, for me, that has been the kind of general journey, is taking the leap, entering the void. I'm using the language here of a message that came through of Tom Kenyon, if any of you receive his messages. Enter the void and be curious and expect miracles. That was the message from the Hathors of Tom Kenyon. So enter the void, be curious, and expect miracles. And I would say, notice the part of you that's like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And all the people behind you, the ancestors behind you who have said that, I don't believe it. You don't have to prove, it's not a proving, it's an invitation. You can feel that feeling, and then I invite you to extend your awareness to the beloved and just see what happens. One of the things I've been doing for myself is I do keep my ancestors behind me, especially these particular ancestors, the settler and the Taino. I also keep the ascendants, meaning I also keep, for me, someone spoke about the movement from 2D, 3D to 5D. So I also keep, for me, the movement, this highest expression. I can feel all of these as my ancestors and my ascendants. They're here for me. And that's for me just how I, especially because the terror, I don't believe it and I'm terrified and I'm mad at you for making me do this, that whenever that voice comes up, I really need to take care of that voice when it starts to be alive in me. And so I call on all the resources in order to do that. I connect to that sphere that we did earlier. Okay, so I want to do a constellation, but I want to take a little moment again. Let me stop the share and just see if you have comments or questions okay. Don't we need to presence the fear and the trauma that it came from? The colonizer mentality came from somewhere? That's a really excellent question. I have my answer, but I don't know if it's the answer. Because there's a couple of answers. Again, a couple of Alison answers. I'm curious what other people's answers are.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't quite get that.
Yes, yeah. It says, don't we need to presence the fear and the trauma that it came from? The colonizer mentality came from somewhere. So my first answer to that question is in some ways my own question, which is, at what point can I just leap into life? Do I have to go over every trauma, put it in its place in order for me to be in life, to be in relationship with life? And my answer for myself is, when I need to do it, I do it. And when I can just jump into relationship with life, I jump into relationship with life. For me, that's how it happens. Specifically to this question and specifically to my journey, I have gone behind. And what I saw for myself is that when I experienced the settlers, let's see if I can say this out loud. Let's see if I have permission to say it out loud. It felt like, like if some harm had come to you and all the thing that's most precious to you had been taken away, and then you see somebody who has all those things, and your society has given you permission to dehumanize them and treat them as just nothing, the rage, the murderous rage, gets played out. And that's what I experienced. That what's behind the perpetrator is a victim. I will tell you, the other thing that I have experienced is that it's a little bit more than, there's an additional dynamic. This is only Alison's experience. You can test it out and sort of play with this. If you are a constellations person, I invite you to play with this. But one of the things I sensed, I'll respond to that, Sheila, because yes, that's exactly right. One of the things I sensed when I feel my ancestors, my indigenous ancestors and my settler ancestors, is that as I said already, harm does not exist in the Taino ancestors in the same way. And it was a surprise for me to find that. One of the reasons I think that's happening, please test this out, is because there was a technology that the settlers had. And that technology was called the written word. And that technology affects us and our relationship to life. And so what I sense, please test this out. What I sense is that my ancestors, they're out of their body. They're back in life, like they are in life now in a different form. Like, it is not a trauma for them. But my ancestors, my settler ancestors, what is the core wound? So we looked at the sphere. You can think of the medicine wheel as a six dimension medicine wheel. So there's the you call them the directions if you like, and then these other dimensions. My settler ancestors, first off, those dimensions here, above and below, those dimensions were cut off. The four directions and the elements, those became desacralized, is that a word? But they're no longer sacred. They're matter. They're like their match or mother, and yet and the mother that has been raped and harmed. And part of my exploration, profaned, thank you, part of my exploration, my personal exploration of why and how did that happen and what sort of entrenched that, has to do with the technology of the written word. So please test that out to see if how that shows up for you. But I think there's some kind of separation, there's some kind of distancing that happens that had not happened in my Taino ancestors, because they were not using the technology of the written word. Okay, I'm going to talk about one more thing. So there's another yeah, thank you. The written word limits infinity to 2D. There's a comment here. So there's a comment here, the alphabet versus the goddess. Yes, excellent. David Abram as well. I have a hard time reading him, but here's some great podcast interviews with David Abrams. Is it Abrams, Lori, or Abram? Maybe you can type it in. So
Abram.
Abram. Okay, thank you. Put his name here if you want. David Abrams' work, also The Alphabet versus the Goddess. That's a wonderful, beautiful text. Okay, what I want to say. So the space in between. The space between includes as much terror as disgust and shame. So yes, that's exactly right. When we take that leap from that square, two-dimensional, three-dimensional world, and even as some part of me is convinced that the life is beautiful, like I know life is amazing, and creation and possibility, all those things are here. Manifestation, I leap from that flat little disc, that flat little dimension, and in that void, I experience terror. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Catherine. So in that void, I experience terror. And what happens when I experience the terror? Well, all sorts of things happen. One of the things that happens is we never leave. We don't leave that dark square, because it's terrifying, or we get frozen. It's very hard to leave. And it's not this is layers and layers of trauma that I'm sensing when I jump into the void. So the work is entering the void. The work is entering the unknown. The work is, can I allow, and you can do it in the safest possible context. Do it through meditation, but bringing yourself into the unknown and developing an intimate relationship with the beloved in the unknown. I don't know if those words make sense, but it's an invitation to a practice. When I enter the void, I can see the part of me that's terrified and is ready to scramble back to that dark square. But can I be curious? So being curious is a beautiful language. Enter the void and be curious. I love how curiosity is so presencing. And expect miracles. And so for me, the expect miracles part means I can extend my sensing out into the beloved and feel the beloved reaching for me. Yeah. Thank you. Just sort of reading comments as they come on. Does anyone have anything to say or? So I'm going to invite, I created this little constellation. I I drew a picture. So I hope it'll help explain it, but I'm going to describe it first in words, just talking to you right now. I want you to, we're going to take a perspective. In fact, we're going to work through 3 different perspectives. However we see, actually with our heart, we're going to see, but 3 different ways of, we're going to locate ourselves in 3 different places and see and look from those places. And it's a personal journey. This is not a universal thing. You might want, in fact, if you have paper or something nearby you, you might want to, you might want to do some writing and make little pieces of paper. So the first part is, as I said, we're gonna work with 3 different perspectives. We're gonna work with perspective 1, perspective 2, perspective 3, and I'll tell you what those are in just a minute. But what we're gonna be looking at are some things that we want from life. So for example, I might want money, because money is something actually it's really valuable. I enjoy having money. It serves my needs and my wants and my vision. So money, I can make a little piece of paper and put money on the desk in front of me. The other thing I put on my version of this, I put relationships. And relationship to me means all my relations and all the dimensions. Remember all the 6 dimensions we felt in the opening meditation. So all these connections. There's a, I'll put the name of Tyson Yunkaporta. He's also been a real gift to me this past month. I've been reading his book. It's called Sand Talk. He's an Aboriginal scholar who is describing the Western world. He's doing his own critical analysis of the Western world from an Indigenous lens. And one of the things he talks about is that a society that cannot have infinite growth will not. A society that cannot be sustained will not be sustained. But in the Aboriginal understanding, in the Indigenous understanding, we cannot have infinite growth, as we know growth happens in cycles. But we can have infinite increase in connection, increase in relationship, increase in information. So infinite increase. So money, I can put in my constellation, I can put money as one of the things I want. I can put relationship as one of the things I want. I chose a 3rd thing. I wonder what that was, because I can't remember right now. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah. I said beauty. You might want to have, Lori, you might want to have other things in your list. You might have many more things. You might need a house, or you might need a car. You might need to pay your student loan. I don't know. I don't know about paying student loans. Part of me is like, that's a whole other system. But I'm sorry I even mentioned it right now. But whatever the other things are that are there that you want, that you're wanting from life to give to you, that when you look at that sphere of creative possibility of life, what can you receive? What are you wanting to receive? And I really want to honor something called desire. Now, desire is a much bigger conversation, but I to feel it as this spark of that initiates relationship, initiates connection. So the constellation is going to involve moving through 3 locations. So taking a perspective from 3 different locations and looking at the things that you're wanting from life that you've put down in your table, or you can use the one that I've created, which is money, relationships, and beauty. And just notice what happens? What do you notice when you stand in the first position? How easy is it for you personally to access those things? When you stand in the second position, how easy is it for you to access? And then in the third. Okay, so it's a very simple structure. Okay, I'm going to show you the screen and you can ask questions. I don't know how to see chat box while I'm sharing screen, but if you do have a question, you can unmute yourself maybe. So here's the constellation. We're asking the question, how do I give from life and what do I need to give in exchange? How do I receive from life and what do I need to give in exchange? And that's the question that we're going to take. And we're going to stand in 3 different positions. So if I were doing this in a closed eyes version, an inner eye version of this constellation, I would step into position 1 when we start and feel myself in position 1 and then look out in front of me at the things that I said that I would like to receive from life. In this case, it says money, relationship, and beauty. Okay. So the very first position is on that black square. So fully, as most of us are right now, really inside of this dimension of our exchange, this dominant system. I'm going to give you just a moment to get yourself ready. Please unmute yourself if you have questions. And then I will ring the bell. So we can all take some time together. I'm looking for my bell ringer here. Okay.
I have a question. I'm somewhat inexperienced with constellations. I've done a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was away for 2 seconds. So the 3 positions are related to these 3 things: money, relationship, or beauty, or I got lost for a second.
Good question. Yeah, great question. The 3 positions are not related. So what I want you to imagine, if you're, for example, in the room, in your wherever you are, say you're standing in a room, the 3 positions are like 3 different locations in the room.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, yeah.
But each time you're going to look at the same things, the things that you want to receive from life.
Okay.
And just notice what happens. You can, if you want, you can bring the question in, how do I receive these things from life? And what do I need to give in exchange? And just see what happens. So we're going to do 1 position at a time. We're going to start in the first position, which is, as I said, is right in that black square. You could call it right in the heart of the capitalist structure. And I'll give you time to take a few moments to do this. So I'm going to ring the bell and I'm going to also stand and feel these positions and look around from this perspective. I'm going to give you 2 more minutes in this sensing. As you come back, I invite you to record. You can, if you want to type things into the chat, but certainly if you're the kind of person, I like to journal, so I do like to write things down. So if you want to take a moment, I'll give you a moment just to collect your sensing, and we'll open up. I'd love to hear from people, a couple of people, about what they received during this sensing. We were just doing the first one. Oh, sorry if that wasn't clear. Yeah, this one was just one, just the first one.
In the center of the box.
Yes, that's right.
Are you inviting sharings?
Oh yeah, do you want to? Yes, I welcome some sharing. Jan, do you want to share what you receive?
Me?
Yeah, do you want to share?
Oh, yes, just briefly. Right away, I sort of had this image of myself kind of standing in the entryway to a bank, and I got this kind of experience of what you described earlier, that the whole thing of finance and money and figuring out how to pay the bills and all that was sort of in the way of life. You know, it was like there's me and there's life and giving and receiving, and then there's this whole thing that has to be dealt with, and it feels confusing, and it feels like there's all kinds of arcane activities going on that seem to take up way too much space in my world and in society. So that was how I experienced it, just sort of standing there kind of confused in the lobby of a bank.
Thank you.
Alison.
Hi, Julie. Oh no, who's I don't know who's speaking.
I said Annabella.
Hi.
Hi. So a familiar feeling was stepping on money. I literally got up and I stepped on the money, and it was sick to my stomach. Then I called on the ancestors, and of course I am from Portugal, born and raised in there. So hey, hello, settlers. And they weren't they were of service. So they were discoverers. Yes. So those were the ones that showed up, not any other variety. I'm sure there are plenty. And so they were of service, and they were given gifts. So whenever, at least at first, when they showed up, you know, there were all kinds of little exculpatory anything, and anything that I say, knowing from my vantage point today, it's like, okay, let's you know, qualify any statement that I make. But, you know, so what came up was really, there were gifts, and that immediately got rid of the sickness to my stomach, because I was being given gifts. So everything was given gifts too. And later on, you know, so my immediate past growing up, both my parents of service 24/7, and then sometimes in very poor areas. And of course, instead of money, their services were paid from, you know, eggs to cows or donkeys, whatever. And so gifts. So it was very interesting to have that theme come back, and of gifts. And also interesting what you've been talking about, receiving the gifts and straight from life. So this was a very interesting portion of Constellation that it doesn't feel like a strange event. It's not news to me, the gift receiving, but it's in this form, it was the first for me. So I appreciate having experienced it.
Yeah. And can you tell me, when you say of service, do you mean, what does that mean?
The ancestors, they were discoverers. So they were of service that way, as in what is beyond that scary. And this is it. Remember the Cape of Good Hope? That was that. It wasn't always the good hope. It's what the heck is beyond that. Nobody knew. There was that scary, the currents were so scary at the time. There weren't the little navigators that we have today, or by any means. So it was a very scary event. And so what's in there? I mean, things were still pretty square, so to speak, very much so. So are you going to fall off somewhere? So it was a scary event. So talk about the parallel to what you were talking about. There's a square, the world, and there is what's beyond it. And so the discoverers dared to go beyond it.
Thank you. That's, yes. There's a very rich space that you're in. That's a very rich space.
Talk about the rich space. Yeah, let's.
Right. I was thinking one more comment. Yes, Julie.
So when I was looking from the black box, it was like everything became commodified. So beauty was something that you could buy. It was a commodity, or relationships were seen in terms of their value, sort of almost on a monetary level. And it was very diminishing. And then the other thing that I had was safety as one of the things that I wanted, but there wasn't any. There were, like, you know, sandbags to kind of wall me off from something, but it was kind of illusory safety.
I have a barking dog, so forgive that. But thank you for bringing that in, Julie. I really appreciate, because I think what I experience is that so many it's the safety question. To entering into the unknown space, we sort of scoot back to what's known because of that safety question. And when you name that the safety was an illusion, it's really helpful to receive that from you. Thank you. I'm going to thank you for sharing. So people are posting. I invite you to post in the chat. I'm going to save the chat later as a separate text, just so I can, you know. And then I would like to shift us to the second location, which is when we have made the leap We've made the leap. We've entered the void. You might say we're still in the atmosphere of that little system, that dark square. But we have made the leap, and I'm going to invite you to keeping your same elements that you would like to receive, that you're inviting to be received from life, and bringing back that question: how do I receive, and what do I need to give when I'm standing in that position? What does it look like? I'm ringing the bell to start. And we'll take about 4 minutes in this field. I invite you to start making your way, recording your observations if you like, or in the chat if you wish. And if anybody wants to share, I'm very curious. I had a very different experience. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. I'm going to read what Leslie posted into the chat. The second position doesn't feel so great. The movement from wanted to has a positive intention, but it feels incredibly weak, unstable, and lonely. When I look at the things I want, I feel a kind of desperate hope that you have for something you don't get. A pointless hope. Yeah. Aware that if it doesn't change from this weakness, if it doesn't improve, I'll go back to the first position. Mm-hmm. I didn't have much relief, Beth. I didn't have much relief. I felt some possibility, but it was so tenuous. Felt like getting my skin scraped off. Yes. When I stepped into that position, I noticed this the first time I did this. There were certain things I felt like I could negotiate, and certain things I felt like I'm never going to get those. So relationship, for example, I thought, I could probably figure out how to negotiate relationship, but money or beauty, both of those things were very far away. Although when I stepped in, I did felt like hopeful. I did think, I could maybe I'm closer to these things. All right, anybody else want to share what they received in this stance? Yeah,
I can share that.
thank you. I see, how about Julie and then Vishala?
So I felt like I can't buy you. I can't buy, and that felt good, that I can't buy. Like these things are given as a free gift, and there was a feeling of gratitude and humility. And regarding safety, I felt like beginning to grow some trust that there might be safety. Yeah.
So I can report kind of on the difference between the first space and the second space, because the first round I did all 3 spaces. I didn't get the instructions. So I kind of revisited them again this time. In the first space, because I was one of those teachers that like stayed until I got my pension. And so like I was in good relationship with money in the first space, but the sacrifice was all the other things. I had 3 things. I had relationships, beauty, and my spiritual devotion, my spiritual life and my devotion. And even though there was some spiritual life and devotion and there was some beauty, the thing that was most damaged was my relationships, actually being in that space. And then when I moved into the second space, sort of the beauty and my spiritual relationship became more alive. And I think that's actually when I realized how damaging the first space was to the relationships that I had, what I had to kind of become and who I had to be to stay and do that. Somehow my relationships were the most damaged. And I'll wait, but maybe I can share the third space, which was I had turned around actually in the third space, and money was there, but it lost its sort of energy, and relationships was finally able to grow. And so that's the piece that I got, was that sort of devotion and beauty were kind of increased, but were steady throughout. But the real chance, if I stepped far enough out, and I actually went outside of my house, even though it's raining, and looked at all the beauty outside my house, because I have beautiful gardens outside my house. And I realized that it felt really good, because I felt like I had a real opportunity that, my work is to open up to relationships in a different way.
I needed to charge up, but I can move now. Yeah.
That's me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And And I appreciate that what you're naming there about that. You got that channel to money, but that the other pieces were sacrificed in that dimension. What do I want to say about this? Well, first, I think maybe before we have any sharing, because I'm just acknowledging the time here, and I would like us to do the one more piece. But I just want to acknowledge that space, what it means to take that leap and to enter that void and open up this question about how do I, here it is. Now I can see all these patterns. They're really screaming at me right now. It felt what it felt. But when it comes up, when those patterns are screaming at you, and life is waiting for you. So this third space, I'm going to, perhaps it'll show up in whatever way, but I'm gonna, because these are personal journeys. This is not the model for everyone. This is your journey. But I want the third space to you're now in the flow of life. Just see if you can bring yourself. Let's see what happens. Can I bring myself in contact with the flow of life? Can I bring myself, who's here? Can I bring myself in the beloved? Maybe I am the beloved. You are the beloved. And that maybe you want to feel that. So you can figure out, it'll arise for you, but you're going to move now into the third space in which as much as you can, to see what arises. Can I step into this third space? Can this body right now step into the third space? And allowing and accepting and being with whatever arises for you. Okay. I'll ring the bell and give us our 4 minutes. Hmm. I'm starting to see, if your chat isn't open, I invite you to take a look, but there's some beautiful messages, things that we've received in this movement. So I invite you to share in the chat. And if there are a couple of people who want to share what they experienced in this position and how it was for you. I will tell you that I was, this thing happened, which happens, where the opening meditation came to me when I stepped in this third spot. So I also went outside because I could feel like, oh, it's definitely not in this room. I was outside for a moment, and what I received was what I shared in the beginning, that it's not three positions around I'm anchored to the earth. It's not me, the earth, and gravity. It's one thing. And when I felt me and say money, I felt like I was there's a part of me that there's this motion that happened where it was like I was just like I was spitting out money. But it was a very playful movement of like, it's just of me. Like there's there's not three separate things, me, money, and whatever the exchange is. There's just this thing, this multiple co-arising. So that was a wonderful surprise to feel that. And they did feel energetically different. Someone's commenting on that in the chat, that that they seem to have different, for me, the money and the relationships and the beauty, they had energetic qualities that were distinct, and they were, and they just sort of arose out of the expression of my being, which is pretty wonderful to experience. But you might have had another experience, so whatever your experience was, if you want to share, I invite that. Yeah. So I want to make a comment. Someone said, do I need, but in the beginning when the question was raised, like, don't I need to understand the trauma in order to step in? And the answer that I gave is, for me, if I can step in, I'll step in. And if I need to look at the trauma, I'll look at the trauma. And I think for some of us, when we go through this journey, part of what it shows us is, oh, there's something here. There's something here that really needs to be looked at. That's just part of your journey. It's just part of your unfolding. You know, when I spoke about my experience of moving into a relationship with the beloved, that is not, it doesn't at all look like a get rich quick scheme. It really does look like Alison's specific relationship with the beloved, Alison, and which can look like Alison's specific relationship with money. And however that journey is going to unfold for me, there's no formula. And so in the same way, what's arising for you is not, it's what it is. It's not part, there's no formula. There's nothing you need to compare yourself to. It's just like, look, here this is. We can enter our own be curious space as we notice what's arising, especially if we found that we actually had a really hard time moving through these different dimensions. They didn't show up as rainbows and light, and maybe they did. Okay, so we're moving into the final 10 minutes, and I still have, do I have anything else on my, I have at least one more thing I want to share. Let me just see what's here. So one of the reasons I'm doing this call is because I want to share that what I've been working on. And because as I started to pay attention to my own journey and how hard it was for me to take that leap, first that leap was even possible, just waking up, there are healthy relationships, you know, I don't have to be caught in this one. But when I discovered the terror, and I really mean, for me, it showed up. I mean, this is an unfolding over many years, because what I, you know, as I said in my own story, I shifted from having a job to deciding, oh, I'm doing this beautiful thing. It's really valuable. It's meaningful to me. It'll make a difference in people's lives. I want to do this work. And then all of a sudden it got really hard, because I had left that little square and I'm now in that, taking that first leap, but still in the atmosphere. And so for me, for years, I mean, there's a lot of variety in the journey, so it's not one line, but it showed up for me as I can't get out of bed. Like, that's one of the ways it shows up for me, because when the terror comes on, I was like, oh, I can't, can I go back to sleep? It was really hard. And then every time, especially recently now, as I've been saying yes to making my own sphere bigger. So the thing that we see as a kind of dynamic when we're working with money, we're talking about money, but really it's all of life, is that we create this sphere. We start to live inside this sphere, and inside this sphere, all the things that we have and believe we can have, and and whenever I wanted something new that I really was like, I really need that, it's really valuable to step in the direction of what I'm wanting to bring into the world, I had to break that open and create a new sphere. And I was always surprised, because it would, from inside of this one, for example, it would look like, well, I can't afford, like, one of the things recently was a studio. At this point, I'd had a lot of experience with just playing with money and expanding that sphere when it seemed small, and then all of a sudden I actually managed to find space for something bigger and required a bigger sphere. So I knew what that path was like. And so I had set an intention to have a studio for my work, which required paying rent. And I had to figure out how extra money would come in. And I'm just sharing my journey. Things happened. My sphere got bigger. Now all of a sudden I have this studio that fits in my sphere, but that's another comfort zone. And so I've having to keep doing my own work so that I can really live in a relationship with the beloved, live in a relationship with life. But even taking this one step for me, from this first sphere to the one that would allow me to have a studio where I pay rent every month, meant that every single step of the journey I had to attend to the terror that would arise. I mean, literally, I would have people stand behind me while I would write emails just to get the next step, because that's how it was arising in me. So knowing that I needed support, knowing that together we can actually create and nourish a high vibration frequency that makes it easier for us to step into that terror space. That is what I wanted to create. And I'm especially interested in other people who, like me, who are very interested in moving into a world where we're bringing back the 6 dimensions, not just a kind of 2-dimensional world, but the multiple dimensions. So I am starting a program that begins this fall, and I'm going to, the larger program is called the Art School for Mystics. And the specific program is called the Mystic Creators Course. So I'm not going to go into this. I'm not going to go over the course and all the things. I'm really just informing you. So if this is of interest to you, if you want support in leaping from that black square into that rainbow sphere of creation, especially if there's a specific vision that you have been trying to bring into the world and you have been getting stuck. And so you can see in this image, this was my sense that we're bringing these seeds, the seed that actually is like any seed, it's the complete information and pattern for unfolding. So that your vision and intention already has everything you need. But when it's in that, first off, if you're planting that in that little black square, very hard, especially if your vision intention is beyond that black square. This is the thing. For those of us who are creating outside of that system, we then have to leave the system behind. So I've been envisioning this little colorful sphere here. That's what I've been envisioning of this course that I'm creating, this community that I'm inviting, is that we're going to create an atmosphere in which your seeds can take root. And we're going to do the work that it takes to look at those places, the terror that arises when we take that leap. I hope that the website is working, but you can, if you are interested, you can look at Art School Mystics. I'll type it in there, .com. Okay. We have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up, and just any comments or questions or any of the things, I welcome that. And I thank you. I thank you all for showing up. Thanks, John, and everyone. Thank you.
So, Alison, I just wanted to say thank you. I find this conversation really fruitful and very creative also, the way you approach this, and for going into a very unsafe space on this journey. This is a safe space. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.